You
Thank you
going?
so much for joining us on Write More Light. I am I'm Sarah here today with Midwest Writing Center Director Ryan Collins. We're going to talk about how to keep your craft alive in these challenging times. Thanks for coming back, Ryan.
Sure. Yeah, it's been a challenging time indeed.
It was really hard for me to not type these challenging times as the title. I I wouldn't be able to live with myself, but it was rough. It was rough. Our proper
Um,
title for today's Write More Light segment is keeping your craft alive in stressful times,
sure.
because that's an every year, not just 2020 issue.
Sure. Yeah. There's always crisis to be had,
And
and also someone trying to have you while you're in crisis. So it's good to have an artistic practice to fall uh, back on instead of falling prey to crisis, I guess.
I mean, for me, I think I learned this best in 2016, the other worst year of recent history. But I think in 2016 we were just mad that all of our favorite celebrities died, right?
Yeah, it seems so long ago that yeah, I do remember being very upset, particularly about Prince. But yeah, yeah, some of those, yeah, I mean, the grief doesn't seem small. Um, but yeah, considering some of the other things that are happening, it does seem maybe it just seems like there's more grief because of some of the things that are happening. So maybe that's a thing, and it's and not so celebrity oriented. It's a little more commonplace, which
And much
maybe
more
is a little
personal,
scarier. Yeah, very. Yeah, exactly.
and also just all of the many things that are happening. We've got Iowa had a hurricane, and all of the West is on fire, and uh, you know, uh, police brutality, and um, pandemics, and travel bans, and we've got everything. This year is the full cornucopia of collective trauma.
Yeah, I think I just saw pictures of is Houston having more flooding as a result of like storms in the Gulf and things like
Hurricanes.
that. Yeah,
There was
that's
just a
Jesus.
4.0 earthquake, or 4.8
Yeah,
earthquake in
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 California. Yeah,
Southern California. It's everything. So,
yeah. It seems like every day is coming out swinging. So
I mean, I
yeah,
barely even remember the killer bees, the murder hornets.
yeah. Luckily, I think the that didn't end up maybe being such a thing. It sounded worse than it was. We could use a lot more things that sound worse than they are instead of
Killer
things that don't
killer
maybe sound
bees
as bad but are actually really terrible.
Killer bees
Um,
sound so much more harmless than murder hornets.
it is true. Yeah, I
The
mean,
same.
and that's a good lesson in poetry. I think somewhere in there is a good lesson in writing. Um, yeah. Anyway, so good.
Yeah, so let's discuss how to maintain your craft, whatever the craft is. It doesn't have to be writing. When you feel like your world is falling apart, I mean, that can happen at any time for any reason, right? Just there's going to be a last straw. There's going to be the feeling of it when it rains, it pours, and we as artists have to be able to um, keep creating. It's part of who we are. It's part of why we are. And in those times, a lot of the time, at least for me, I need to take a break so that I'm not forcing myself to create garbage, because my heart is somewhere else, or my heart is too heavy, or my brain is somewhere else. But part of the process of being able to create that good art, that better art, is maintaining something in the meantime. Do you want to start? Talk about your advice for times like that?
No, yeah, no, well, advice. I don't know how much advice I have, but I like a lot of what you're saying, and I think that's true. I think if you're a person who is inclined towards creative expression of any kind, that hopefully, all jokes aside, hopefully that's a refuge, and that's a space to sort of like go and sort of like maybe make sense of things, or um, at least, you know, sort of unburden oneself, even just if it's only to oneself or just sort of to the ether. And yeah, I think you're totally like, you know, there's a whole school of thought about artistic practice that it sort of, if not depends upon, thrives under circumstances of crisis, be they like personal, or, you know, global, communal, whatever it might be. And I don't know, I don't want to get into that too much, because that can be dicey. I guess if you thrive under those circumstances, now is probably a fruitful time for you, I suppose. But yeah, I like what you said about like not trying to force. I mean, I think that's always applicable, right? Like I don't ever feel, sometimes if I haven't been writing, or haven't been disciplined about writing type things, there's like an urge to maybe, you know, do more than feels natural. I don't want to say comfortable, because what's comfortable, and sometimes, you know, the best work comes when you're making yourself a little uncomfortable. But like, yeah, that feeling when you're just forcing it to force it to say that you did something, you know, that feels a little like checking things off a to-do list, in a way that's maybe not so satisfying. And for me, like that can be defeating, right? Um, like I try to avoid those things, because then it ends up being sort of a vicious cycle of like, oh, I haven't done this in a while, I should do this thing, I did this thing and I did it terribly, now I'm upset that I did this thing terribly that's supposed to be satisfying.
I can't call myself
I
an
have to
artist
step
anymore
away.
because I made something crappy.
Yeah. I think it's easy to fall into those kind of feedback loops. So whatever you could do to not fall into such a feedback loop, I think is good. I think, yeah, I mean, and like just the whole like taking time, the time that you need, like, unless you're under some sort of like actual real concrete, you know, deadline where like money or, you know, publication or something, you know, consequences are involved, I guess. You're not on any deadline. And it seems a pretty safe bet that crisis will be there for you, if you need it. So there's no like trying to race to keep up with it. Also seems like kind of a fraught notion, and maybe not the healthiest thing to do. Um, but I think, yeah, like if you can find a way to like to do that thing and have it be constructive, or like feel like it's serving some sort of purpose in your life, I think that's the best thing you can hope for. And if it's good, right, like what you're talking about, like writing well, I'm assuming you're sort of referring to things that like writing something you'd be like feeling good about maybe sharing with other people, or trying to like seek publication with. um that's great. But I think even if you can just do something for yourself, that seems like a lot, and definitely enough.
I have like 100 responses. I had to take notes while you were talking. Uh,
Sorry.
the first is, so I'm one of those people who just doesn't make good art when they're upset. But the thing about that is, first, you talked about this in one of your Write More Light segments. Try again and fail better. Um, that's an important note, right? You can always fail and then try again. But then also, we um, we are always going to be our own worst critics. None of us are Kanye West. And part of that is that we expect our work to meet our taste, and it's not going to. Your taste is the best, right? At least from your own point of view, my taste is going to be the best, right? And no matter how hard I try, I'm never going to be Hemingway or whatever, whoever my favorite is.
I was gonna say good, but okay.
I really like long sentences. Um, and
Sure.
you know, as you grow, your taste changes. Your taste gets better. So you know, the better you get. Like if you know, if today my favorite is Hemingway, and I get better, then tomorrow my favorite is going to be I'm holding Hanif Abderraki right now, so that'll be.
I am not surprised at all.
Because
I
that
was
was
gonna say,
my third response. Was no one. He has this wonderful tiny essay that I referenced in the Young Emerging Writers internship. No one is making their best work when they want to die. So it's okay. The whole point of the three things I said is it's okay if your art doesn't meet your expectations, because I mean that's what revision is for. Um, but also you're never going to be as good as the things that you love. But as you get better, your tastes also get better. That doesn't mean that what you make is bad. It just means that it's not as good as your favorite, which is awesome. You never want to be the best because then you can keep growing. Um,
yeah,
in the hard times, the important thing is to make something, which is also why one of my pieces of advice always, no matter what, even especially for writer's block, is like just make some kind of art. I have definitely, in times when it's been hard to physically write, I've made collages, and now I love making collages. I've sold a couple of collages. Um, you
there you
know,
go.
when I'm real stressed and there's just a huge block, I make lists instead of even just regular journaling is too hard. I make lists. I'm like, here is what I did today in bullets. Um, or if I have to watch 6 hours of a sitcom because my brain is on fire, I'm sitting there knitting, and that's something, and that counts. I don't necessarily advise knitting. I think cross stitching is funnier, but I don't know how to do it. Funnier because
Um,
you can do whatever you want. You can wish you were a tree. Um,
I mean, yeah, I live with someone who is adept with the cross stitching to excellent humor effect. Actually, you can see a little Rose Apothecary cross stitch up in the corner there.
Shout out to Steve.
That's my partner. Yeah, getting that Emmy money. Um, yeah, yeah, making anything, like making dinner. I think people don't. I don't think a lot of times people look at like all the little ways in which we're sort of like creative or that we like make things and embrace those a little bit more. And I'm sure a lot of people are probably, I mean, there's enough TV commercials playing into the cliche of people being tired of having to like make dinner at home because they're stuck at home all the time. Um, but I mean, it is an opportunity to make something, particularly like not for yourself. I mean, if you're making collages and people are selling them or people are buying them, excuse me, like that's even better. Like people do not buy the food that I make. That would be cool if they did.
I would.
Um,
You are supposed to be a great cook.
Depends on the day. And I mean, as far as like the taste thing, yeah, I hope our tastes get more expansive. I know at least being a musician, there's like a thing that it doesn't seem as true maybe with writing, at least in my experience, but that like once you start to hit a certain age, you sort of like max out and you're sort of like the variety of your musical appreciation, like the kind of the number of bands you like or different kinds of music you like. I know plenty of musicians and music adjacent people who have sort of like copped to that. I really try to like actively like be the opposite of that. I don't have to try very hard just because I'm always kind of interested in finding new things to listen to, new things to read, new things to watch.
And there's always going to be more.
Yeah, for sure that. But as far as like, I don't know that it's ever healthy to try to like, there's a school of thought of like, the emulative. I find poet that I like. And so in order to be a better poet, I study this poet and I write poems in the style of this poet as much as I can until I feel some sort of like internalization or some sort of, I don't want to say mastery, but like until it sort of becomes sort of like you've got like a total handle on it. Yeah, it's got some sort of like natural feel to it. And then you move on to something else. And if that works for you, I think that's great. Just like anything else, like, whatever writing advice is generative for you and serves your work, I think is the good advice. But I guess my concern about something like that is particularly when you're like holding yourself up to like, work that inspires you or work that's influential. It seems like kind of a fraught contest, because it seems like it's like the Globetrotters playing the Washington Generals, right? Like, not to suggest that you all out there, terrific humans, are the Washington Generals, but like, if you hold work in such high esteem that you feel like creating work equivalent to that is outside of your grasp, then trying to do that while believing that seems like maybe not the most productive thing.
I mean,
Um,
it's worth practicing, but yeah, having this idea that there is only one answer to best is totally unhealthy. But I think I definitely get something out of trying to emulate others, in that it definitely expands my abilities.
Sure, yeah, for sure. And I think like and I've seen friends of mine and writers I admire. I think there's been and not just in books, but like in returning to work that is important, or sort of like spiritually satisfying, or is kind of a touchstone for you. I think that's like particularly like in the last few months, I've seen a lot of people kind of talking about that. Um, like, I know there was something going around like, how do you organize your books, and some of them are like personal. One of the options is like personalization, just kind of like what it means to you. And
Hmm.
having recently moved, that's kind of I've got a combination of all of those things happening in different areas. I've got some things by presses, some things by just like I want them together because they're meaningful together. But returning to work like that, I think, is always, um, whether it's crisis, whether it's just feeling kind of stuck, whether it's just looking for a reminder why you got into whatever creative practice you got into in the first place. I think that returning to that sort of work, and not with expectation of like, oh, I'm going to read this book that I love, and then I'm going to like write things that I'm happy with. Like, hopefully, sure, if that's, that seems optimistic to me, but like, if you're returning to the things that you love because you love them, and you got some sort of juice out of them, like, I think that's enough. And you can kind of see where that goes. And yeah, I would second like the whole, I feel lucky. I play drums. And I played drums before I wrote, because I got drums before I learned how to write because I was really young. So having something else that I can sort of like channel energy into, and that's sort of a different, there's a lot of crossover between the two. But obviously the one's got a lot more sort of physical sort of um, embodiment kind of, right? When I play, I can kind of sort of like shut a lot of things off in my head, whereas writing is sort of like also physical, but less so. And obviously it demands a totally different kind of mental focus, at least for me. So having something that's sort of, those are two kind of different things. And that's been helpful and constructive for me for a long time.
Yeah, in that vein, I also would say, for me, something that sort of jogs my creative, not ability, but like the ability to create, is changing up the physicality of it. I've never been a typer. That doesn't come naturally to me. It doesn't feel like writing to me, but a lot of people are, which is dope. Whatever it is that makes you write, do it. Um, but switching up your medium, or like the physical way that you create, can do a lot for changing what you're creating. So I might, if I'm feeling like nothing's coming because the world is falling apart, I might try and type out whatever it is from jump, right? Or if I'm a typer, I might try doing the physical writing, uh, and that I think serves the same way with other mediums, right? You might try a different instrument, or a different, if you, like, my sister is an oil painter, she might sketch for a couple of days.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, and yeah, I would second that too. Like, I try not to be very denominational about the method and um, the format in which I write. Like, some things I type up, some things I'll like do in like the notes app on my phone, some things I write out longhand. I have really terrible handwriting, so that can be dicey. But to wit, when I hadn't written much this year, and then when lockdown hit in early March, I started writing a little bit. A mutual friend of ours, Becca Claver, started kind of like a mini pop-up journal that was sort of like writing or like poems or writing about the pandemic. And that sort of like, I was like, oh, that's really cool. She's done other things like that before that are really cool. And so that was kind of a prompt. And I got in this online group, like a community writing group that was meeting every Wednesday, like in the afternoons. And that's sort of like that gentle accountability that just sort of like, oh, I'll do this. These people seem nice. And it was hosted by a really terrific poet named Kendra DeColo in Nashville. And she would, for the first few weeks, it was her, and then other people kind of jumped in and they would have prompts. They'd have like a poem or a reading or something like that. So again, bringing work that moves them or that inspires them. And then like trying to like craft a prompt out of that. Like that sort of thing. Like it's one of the things I really like prompts. I know a lot of writers who don't, but like sort of creating a puzzle to get out of or to get into. I think that's kind of cool, or like at least setting up some parameters that you can write into. And I started, and I was doing all of those longhand when I was like, so I had a legal pad, and I was trying to keep it chronological. So I date everything. I'm real uptight about dating all of my drafts and everything like that. But like, so I have a legal pad of most everything that I've been writing since the lockdown hit in Illinois in like the second week of March. And I've started typing things. It's kind of moved. Like I said, I try not to be too like orthodox about it, because then I think that can get into bad places where it's like, oh, where's my legal pad? I can't write without my legal pad, or I have to do this, like that sort of
I
mentality
used to have a
sketches me
pen
out.
I needed to use, which is not healthy.
That, yeah, and it's a double-edged sword, because I know a lot of people who get a lot out of ritualization, and again, like I feel like if that's something, if it helps to give you some structure, if that like informs like some sort of like discipline or order, just that 1 hour a week of like meeting, and I would come in late because I usually worked in the afternoons, but like knowing that I had this group, knowing that I had a prompt there waiting for me, knowing that I had some readings picked out by a writer who I really admire, and that other people were sharing their work as they were writing it, like super rough drafts, right? Like not even really for like critique, but just to be like, hey, thank you for this prompt. Here's this thing that I did. And we weren't really like, oh, like, I think you could do this differently here, or maybe go check out this thing. It wasn't like this sort of like super craft intensive thing. It was more just about collectively like, hey, we all made a thing today. We all started from the same place, and we all went our divergent ways, and we're all, just in a place where we feel comfortable sharing it. That was really that was so helpful. And
I cannot speak enough or speak highly enough of accountability groups. I've had a couple since March, since COVID, that have had varying degrees of um, accountability.
yeah, right.
But I cannot speak highly enough of having one of those. And I actually encourage someone to join. And this is a little promo here. Our writer studio group, because they wanted some accountability, something to keep them on top of their craft. So anybody who is out there listening, the first and third Saturdays of the month from 11 to 1 Central Time, we have, the Midwest Writing Center has a group of people who look at each other's writing and talk about writing and what they're working on and what troubles they're having. And it's really, really great. You are welcome to come, whoever you are, hit us up. Also, I'm always down to have people join an accountability group, because I'm much more accountable to strangers who expect something of me than friends to whom I can make excuses. But
yeah, no,
highly recommend having an accountability group. And you're right, like knowing that there's a prompt out there and someone out there who's waiting to hear that you're working, that they should be working, has worked wonders for me. It certainly isn't going to be the thing that works for everyone, but that's why we're here. That's why we're talking about it. There are a million ways to keep up your craft, low pressure when times are hard and you can't do the proper creating that you want to be doing. You know, the more important part is to be able to create something, to have that habit so that when the time comes, you'll be ready.
Yeah, for sure. And like, yeah, the habit thing I think is big, like of just, you know, whatever it is, like doing it a little bit, maybe not every day. Like, I always like I admire writers that like preach to like try to write every day.
First thing in the morning before you have coffee.
Yeah, I mean, whatever it is, yeah, it does seem like you know, there's a lot more kind of early risers out there than there are sort of like um, late night folks
I'm
like
not
me.
among that.
Whatever works for you, but like I think the
That
only,
though, people preach like there's only one way, like whatever works.
well, yeah, I mean, like because there's money to be made or there's at least perceived money to be made in preaching your one way as the one way, which is not really something that I subscribe to, or we try to have the writing center subscribe to for sure. Um, the only thing I think that's tricky about like those sort of like dictates or like self maxims or whatever, you know, like one should write every day, or you know, that's cool, but like if you don't, then it's like it seems like prime opportunity for those kind of negative feedback loops, right? Like where if you set up the thing and you don't do the thing, then there's the possibility for self shaming to come in.
Oh yeah,
And
definitely.
I know few agents more powerful in shutting down creative expression and practice than shame.
Whatever it is,
Particularly the
don't
kind
let
that comes
yourself
from
believe you
here.
failed.
Right. Yeah. So like, you know, how does one find a fine line between being disciplined and being like unreasonable with oneself and one's time and one's like own you know, state of being, which I think, you know, like for what we're talking about today, like that's sort of um you know, I don't want to say maybe the primacy, but like it's certainly something to be aware of. And like, to be fair, like the writing that I was when I was generating work on a regular basis, the group was helpful for that, but it sort of I was going on my own. I write a lot in series, so once I kind of get an idea and a set of parameters, I tend to like write into those parameters indefinitely, which I don't know if that's good or bad, but it certainly leads to a lot of writing, at least for me. I like serial poems and things like that. I like projects that sort of, you know, expand. So I
That's
go ahead.
important, right? Because you take what works.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it works for me. And it's also like something I like to read. You know, I'm kind of a disciple of Jack Spicer. Hello, sweetness. Oh, full on kitten sweetness. That's the best part of this show. I want a kitten to snuggle now too. But I'm a little bit of a disciple of like Jack Spicer and um, you know, the serial poem and that kind of dictation and a lot of poets like that that are kind of, you know, that find a project and just write into it for forever potentially. um it hasn't been as productive lately, but it's there and it's waiting, and some of it is like kind of in direct response. I started um I think I remembered something I was going to say, doing things you don't usually do, right? Like when we were talking about being comfortable, like one of the cool things about prompts, particularly if they're not of your own formulation, is like you don't maybe know what's coming. And I get where some people don't dig that kind of uncertainty, but I really like it. I like going into a room with people and like, hey, we're going to write a thing, what is that thing? And then someone has some kind of prompt or some kind of reading. I feel like it takes a little bit of like the mental emotional load off of trying to like be your own sort of like idea generator all the time. um
Which is impossible at a certain point.
I mean it
I
can
mean,
that, yeah, I mean that can be if you don't already have something that you're writing into, or if you're like if you're working on long form fiction, if you're working on if you have whatever kind of project, whatever shape that it takes, you know, then you've maybe got something to go to. But yeah, if you get jammed up on that, getting outside of that or writing adjacent to that, you know, doing writing that you didn't expect, um I think is good. So like part of the series that I'm working on, um a lot of the stuff I've been writing the last few years is like not very personal I oriented. A lot of it is prose. A lot of it is not. It's like a persona, so it's not. It's like anything but autobiographical, right? It's like it's all like work of imagination. Whereas the stuff that I've been writing since the pandemic hit is a lot more like sort of documentary and like personal I, and just trying to like include everything, like not putting up like I'm not going to talk about this sort of thing, or I'm not going to talk about this kind of like everything is game. It's all from a first person I perspective, and there's no real like shape. Some of them are prose, some of them are delineated. So like I guess like my parameters for the series were to not have too strict of parameters, because usually I'm like very strict about it.
That's something I think that also gets undervalued is the value of documentary, right? Whether or not it's a pandemic or a personal tragedy. If you can't write and you think maybe this will be something that you want to keep, like something you may want to create on later, taking notes counts. And that's, you know, I said that I make bulleted lists when things are really hard creatively for me, and you come back to it and you have memories when you're feeling better or feeling removed from it, and that creates a whole generative cloud. So whatever it is that will help you make art later, I think is what's important to create now.
Right. I mean, well, like that kind of list making that you're talking about is like cloud seeding, right? You know, to kind of torture the metaphor a little bit, but like, you know, if you assemble enough stuff and you have enough stuff around, when you do feel like the conditions are right for you to sort of dive into them, or when you feel at an appropriate remove from crises, insofar as such removes exist, that you can sort of dive into those things, then yeah, you've sort of like, you know, Jack Spicer talked about furniture, like the furniture that's in your head, like as language, right? So you've got this language and you're sort of moving it around and you receive it from wherever you receive it. So if you appoint, you know, to sort of take that idea and run with it, if you appoint the mansion of the mind with enough like weird, strange, and awesome furniture, whenever you're ready to sit down and like chill, you can probably find a nice Chase lounge to rest your weary bones on, and do something with it, right? Like have that be generative.
With the list thing, you don't have to physically go back and read your lists, but just the act of documenting will make it easier to access when the time comes. I've been trying to think of non-pandemic things, right? Because that's what's big and pressing on our minds.
The era of the pandemic novel is upon us. It's coming. It's already started. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of it for sure.
Plenty of people are plenty annoyed with me by now talking about my allergic reaction that I had, but like that's a personal thing that had a huge effect on me, and like there's a little bit of trauma involved. Like when I see the clothes I wore the day I got that that contact with that plant, I'm like, I should wash these again. I've washed them 20 times. Like, am I ever going to wear them again? Should I just throw them out? But, you know, having something to harken back to, I think I could never have imagined previously that an allergic reaction would be something that would produce trauma in me. But, you know, now I'm like, oh, should I document some of this stuff? Like, this might be useful at some point. Like, I think probably best as a metaphor, but like maybe I write some long form fiction and this is part of the story. And I never would have even thought to look up this
poison sumac. You never thought about becoming an expert on poison sumac, right, until it like ruined a couple weeks of your life.
And I also never would have considered like that poison ivy could be a day ruiner. I've never had it, and I assumed it would be like normal contact dermatitis, like just a normal rash. But like now, this is something that it'll probably someday be useful in an essay, right? Like you take the personal and you dive into something bigger and deeper. Maybe it's about healthcare, whatever.
Right.
You don't know what's going to be useful later. So that's another reason that lists can be helpful. Once it's written down, it's going to be in your mind a little harder.
Yeah, I mean, it gives your associative logic more to associate with,
Right.
right? Um, and yeah, if I was going to say something else, I can't remember what it was. But
Write it down, man.
well, but oh, the listing. Thank you. Yeah. So like, but the other thing about like, you know, I'm not going to be able to name names because I'm not that smart. I'm not an academic, but like, you know, there's a school of thought that's sort of like that as artists or writers or whatever, that there's sort of a lot of artists or creative people sort of have like a single question that they're constantly writing into, or a single sort of concern that sort of guides a lot of their work, and maybe it takes different forms and things like that. But I think the way that we arrive at those things, or the way that those things start to sort of populate our mind or become furniture in the mind, is that sort of constant listing. Like if I went back through like the last 10 years in my notebooks and things like that, I'm sure I would find a lot of like repeating language, repeating images, stuff like that. And that stuff ends up coming out. It ends up getting like thought through in different ways. Some people, excuse me, some people like think about that as like spinning wheels, but I mean, I think it's just like the way the mind sort of like works through and develops problems and questions and tries to find solutions.
What is the name of the person who talks about the furniture?
Jack Spicer,
I want to put it in the comments.
great American poet, Jack Spicer. They should check out The House That Jack Built, which was edited by the great poet Peter Gizzi. It's a transcription of several of Jack Spicer's lectures, and it is pretty incredible.
I will absolutely look into it. But I put it in the comments for those who wanted to learn more about the furniture and also poetry, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, all kinds of good stuff.
Believe.
He was a weird cat, and wrote a lot of really amazing poems. Yeah, one of those things that I got turned on to that sort of reconfigured my whole existence as a writer, for sure.
That's another thing I wanted to be sure to talk about. Really giving yourself, when you're having a hard time creating, really short, as a writer, I'd say really short readings. You know, some article out there on the internet. But if you know, if you're a visual artist, you know, go to one of those virtual tours of the museums that make the kind of art that you're, or that display the kind of art that you love. My cat is still here.
I hope so. I mean, that would be a real tragedy if it wasn't.
Oh.
But yeah, I mean, I think you always need fuel, and that's kind of, I mean, I guess it doesn't mean that it has to be like newly discovered fuel, but like for the thing that we were talking about with you know, people sort of maxing out on their sort of like variety of a musical appreciation, like I always
but also making it low pressure so that it's, you know, you don't have to read a book.
Whatever it is. Yeah. But like, I also think like, you know, different kind of crises and trauma can, not in like a silver lining kind of way, but like, those kind of experiences can also open us up to other kinds of fuel, or other kinds of like, receiving other forms of creative expression differently, right? Things that we maybe like didn't appreciate or kind of looked at in a different way. Maybe we have a different understanding of, or we might, if we leave ourselves open to them. Because like you said, you didn't think about like your poison sumac experience as like a source of trauma, but I don't think most people go around thinking about what is going to be a source of trauma. And no, I don't mean it in like a facetious way at all. I just like, I think most people start to get in the business of identifying and working through trauma after it's already happened, right?
Right.
Which makes sense. Like, one doesn't want to spend too much of one's life anticipating trauma. That seems like a fraught existence. But you don't know necessarily what the thing is. And so, you know, in the same way that you don't know what that thing is going to encounter that's going to like put you into some sort of state of crises, you also don't maybe know the medicine that might help like pull you out of it a little bit.
Right.
So, you know, trying to at least be open to things that maybe in the past were not as appealing or just sort of conceived of differently. How does it feel being cat furniture?
Oh man,
Is that a good
I I
occupation for you
I
right
love
now?
my shoulder cat, and it's much better than when
I'm
he was trying
super
to sit at the
jealous. I'm
keyboard.
just kidding. Yeah, I'm making jokes because I want a cat crawling around my shoulders.
This is Carter, everyone. He
Hi,
is my
Carter.
baby.
So yeah, um, and
Uh,
go ahead.
oh, no. I was just going to move on to my personal recommendations for things that sort of jogged me out of my my emotional blocks. Do you, did you have something else first?
No, go ahead.
Um, so I said short pieces. I personally really have a soft spot for. I'm a prose writer in general, so my recommendations are going to be prose. Um, but short stories and essay collections are my go-to all the time. Um, I am always going to recommend Joe Mino's Demons in the Spring for short stories. He has some really short ones. Um, we've got a comment here. Christina is watching during class. So hi, Christina's class. I love that. That's actually what we really want. So keep it coming. Um, he has
Hello,
some really
students.
Joe Mino has some really short, like 1-2 page stories, and they're always a little surprising. He often has things that exist in what we expect the normal reality to be. But then every once in a while, he throws in just one weird, otherworldly, supernatural, magical realist element. Um, for instance, he has a story in which people have teeny tiny wild animals as pets. Um, Obviously, I will never say a bad thing about Hanif Abdurraqi, but his essays range in length from 2 pages to 30. So if your attention span is not that, you're gonna have to sort of filter that out for yourself. Most poetry is short, shorter than a novel. Most. Um, but again, you're going to have to be a little more discerning with that. Ryan, I'm going to let you give some recommendations on what inspires you, what jogs you in the poetry world.
Oh, okay. Right now, sure.
I can do it.
What in poetry?
I'm
No, it's cool. I probably have things I could say.
I'm currently
Um,
reading Silencer.
okay. Yeah. I
Uh,
mean, Marcus is great. Ross Gay has a new book out that I have not had time to check out yet, but I'm sure it is dope. It is also basketball adjacent, so it's probably extra dope. Um, I
I
just
don't know what
caught
this was. That was supposed to be snapping, and I just wanted money instead.
just want to get paid. Um, you need to make some more collages. Um, um, I just caught. I mean, one thing that's cool right now is there's so many online lit events. It's bananas, and like most of them are free. And so you can just kind of like dip in anywhere in the world kind of, and that's got these things up. I just caught a reading. Bennington College does a series. I don't know if they do it in the fall and the spring. They're doing it in the fall. And I was just lucky enough to catch Shane McCrae
Mm.
and Kiki Petrosino, who are two of my favorite poets, reading together. That was pretty terrific. Um, yeah, I don't. Maybe if you go and check out Poetry at Bennington, they might have that up. But they both have new books out that I'm sure are just challenging and brilliant and soul satisfying and historically rich for sure.
I will
Um,
say something that always helps me feel a little more like I can is the Neil Gaiman Make Good Art speech. You can find that online. You can find it in print. You can find it as a video.
Yeah. I can't
But
remember
it's
if that was at the National Book Awards, or I don't remember where he gave that, but yeah, it's a good one for sure.
I don't remember. I have a really great book version of it where each page is like an illustration. It's really
Oh, okay,
cool, and it
sure.
makes me feel like I too can make good art.
Well, and yeah, I mean, and like on that, thinking about that, Ursula K. Le Guin's
Mm-hmm.
Lifetime Achievement. award, like which Neil Gaiman I think introduced her for at the National Book Awards maybe 4 or 5 years ago. That's definitely online. I can't remember the year, but I think that is a really excellent speech to return to at the present moment, especially considering some of the larger sort of social and political crises that we currently find ourselves enmeshed in. I go to music a lot, especially early on in the pandemic. I was listening to music pretty much constantly. Oh, there you go. Right on, for sure. Excellent find.
Every page is different looking, which is fun.
That's a trip.
Um,
It looks like that Seven Poets 4 Days book, which
I
I
have
do
that
not.
next to me, and I thought that's what it was. I asked my sweetheart to bring it to me because I had this here and
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Look at you, all prepared. Like, but yeah. So I've been digging into a lot of music, more than anything else. Yeah. Shout out. Tomorrow is the anniversary of John Coltrane's birthday, and WKCR in New York will be doing a 24-hour tribute, playing things from his entire catalog. They like they're worth checking out because they do this for, if you're into jazz or improvisational music, I guess I should say. They do this for a lot of well-known musicians on their birthdays and stuff. So it's a good one to have like in your bookmarks. The other one is, oh man, I can't remember what the main radio station in New Orleans is that they broadcast like Jazz Fest. That's another really good one. I love stuff like that, like just hearing. I'm interested in what music is popular in other places, because the place that I live has a lot of good music, but it's not always maybe as like various as it could be, because it's a small place. We live in a small place, and it's kind of,
your own. You're not learning something new if you're engaging with what you're familiar with.
Sort of, yeah, sort of.
But I also want to shout out. We're talking about music. If don't discount the power of things that make you move your body. I want to note that sometimes I put on like a playlist or whatever while I'm cooking, or mostly cooking. And
yeah, for sure.
And that counts as creative energy. Just that counts. Give yourself
credit. I would totally second that. I mean, in whatever small, like I'm no athletic trainer, obviously, but walks are great, and they can be really meditative. I think like you get out what you put in, and so if you're just kind of like going for a stroll to stretch your legs, that's cool. But if you're trying to do something a little, I would recommend to anybody out there who's interested in like walking is a little bit more of a generative practice.
Vision Matur from Turkey says that she's written every book she's ever written while walking.
Yeah, I can see that.
Imagine it starts out in her head. It's hard to while you walk.
Yeah, when I was living in Chicago and I was going to grad school at Columbia College, shout out to Tony Trigilio, who was a really amazing teacher, really terrific poet, and I hope he still teaches it on occasion. There'll be some lucky students. Meditations and Poetics class, and so we looked at a lot of different kinds of meditative practices. And one of the ones I found to be really generative was walking meditation. It also helped living in Chicago, where there is much to overhear and much to see and many places to go and much strangeness. But I think you can find strangeness anywhere. I think that's part of the discipline of like certainly being a writer, but I think probably being any kind of creative practitioner is like looking for that which is like seemingly mundane but strange or odd in some way, and sort of like picking up on that strangeness or oddness, and walking around just even in your own surroundings is a good way to do that.
We are coming up close to an hour. Do you have any final notes?
I don't. I don't at all.
My little short summary, I guess, is what to do when it's hard to write, hard to create. Don't panic, and indulge your senses. Do you want to give a prompt for today? I will, otherwise.
Do I want to give a prompt for today?
I like to end with a prompt, so that people don't join us and see us being silent and then dip out, and then you can leave and keep writing for as long as you need.
Sure. I don't have a prompt right off the top of my head. I would defer to Bernadette Mayer probably, and that really excellent list of writing experiments that she has at the UPenn website.
I love that list. I don't have it available immediately to throw in the comments, but I would say for a prompt that I'm feeling today is to give someone else advice on what to do when it's hard to create. Um, I'll I'm gonna set like a 2 minute timer on that so that I can come back to y'all. Ryan, would you care to write with me on this prompt? Again, I'm only setting a 2 minute timer instead of a 5 minute timer, um, because I want to give you all the opportunity to keep writing after we're done, but I also don't want to bore you to death before I say goodbye. So today's prompt: give me some writing on what to do when it's hard to create. This can be fiction or poetry, but it can also just be a journal. Like I always say, in response to prompts, I often just end up journaling, and that is fine. So, 2 minutes. I know that was a real short amount of time. I don't think that's a proper amount of time for a prompt, generally speaking. I did. I'm actually really excited that this happened. I thought I was just going to journal and be like, and today I talked to Ryan. But I ended up doing a list narrative, which is one of my favorite forms. So that was really cool. I'm kind of proud of that I was able to create. um, so, step one, don't panic, right? Step two, breathe, stretch. Step three, walk. Did you have anything you were okay with sharing, right?
I didn't really get much, but I was thinking of a poem that I would suggest people read. That's really awesome. Well, just in terms of the prompt, I couldn't come up with anything better than thinking of this poem in 2 minutes. The poem is called "Don't Kill Yourself" by a Brazilian poet named Carlos Drummond de Andrade. Probably the most well-known translation is by the great American poet Elizabeth Bishop. It's included in her collected poems. It's pretty easy to come by. If you've never read it, you should. It's always good advice.
Excellent. Love it. Put it in the comments. I did put it in the comments. Um, I'm going to give a quick little update on what's up with Midwest Writing Center in the next couple of weeks. This Saturday, we've got the release party for a book called Reflections. It's a book of poetry by a local teenager named Faith Foley. Super excited about that. Do we have an upcoming spot on Living Local?
We do, yeah. This Thursday, Faith and one of our young emerging writer interns, Charlie Heber Spates, will be appearing on Living Local. They'll both be reading selections. Faith will be reading from Reflections, and Charlie will be reading from the upcoming Atlas 15 literary magazine that the interns produced over the summer.
The Atlas 15 will have a release party October 1st, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. Both the Reflections release party and the Atlas release, you are totally welcome to join. You can watch us live on Facebook, or you can join our little Zoom party. Hit me up for the invite to those Zooms, or just go to the events that are listed on our page.
Don't forget about the banned books reading. Tuesday, September 29th, banned books.
In between those two, Tuesday, September 29th, we've got the banned books reading. That's at 7 p.m. Same situation. We've got the event posted on Facebook. We'll do a live stream. You can also join our Zoom party. We're going to have a lot of local amazing folks at the banned books reading.
It's going to be a good Quad Cities, Iowa City collaboration.
Both Ryan and I will be reading some of our favorite literature. And as we are, experts at reading, it's worth coming just for that. In October, we've got a lot more coming, so stay tuned. You can also look out in the great wide internet for information. We've got MWC Press has a book coming out, debut novel by author Ryan Collins. That's coming up October 15th. It's getting dope reviews all over the place, so you should look into that. Obviously, we'll be posting about it, but that's the near future. And with the Midwest Writing Center, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back. I'll be back Thursday with a guest, and please write more light into your life. Thank you again for coming.
Take care, everybody.